Hi, I'm Olivia. This is my recommendations channel. I'm mostly recommending books right now, but I do have, I've been doing some traveling on the Leon Creek and the Salado Creek Greenways. So I'm recommending those as well as the books I'm talking about while I'm there. So today we are going to talk about The Secret Garden. Now this, and I do mean this, is the book that made me a reader. When I was a kid, my mom subscribed me to a picture book club for a while. And I read those books and I liked them. And one day my mom, when I was, I guess, 8, I think the print date on this is 1974. Yes, Fifth Dell Printing, January 1974. So I guess I was 7 or 8. We go into the Crocs and Brentano's bookstore, and my mom comes out with a Crocs and Brentano's bag. She goes in the children's section, comes out with the bag, and hands it to me and says, "This is one of my favorite books." And I open it up, and it's just text. I mean, there's some images, some illustrations, but it's basically just text. And I was like, "You want me to do what?" There's like, I felt like Alice in Alice in Wonderland. There's no pictures in this book. What is going on here? And she's like, "Just try it. You know, see if you like it, you like it." And I didn't just like it. I got to the end of it, and I said, "I didn't want that to end." And she said, "Okay, read it again." And I got silent. And my mom's like, she looked over, and I had turned the book back to the beginning and had started reading it all over again. So yes, this is one of my favorite books. This is if people ask me what my favorite book is, I usually answer this because, like I said, this is the book that made me a reader. After this, I discovered that I'm neurologically one of those people who sees the action of the book as a movie in my head. I think if I sub-vocalize it, there's not a whole lot of it. There's maybe the occasional sound, but mostly it's just pictures. So, the book that made me a reader. So here's my little, not so little, 9 pages of script. Also, I know it's falling apart. This is, if I ever post a picture of my TBR pile, I'm pointing at my TBR pile right now. If I ever picture, you'll see this on top of the TBR pile. It used to be on the bottom, but then it was hard to get the book that I'm reading next off the bottom of the pile, so I put it on top. So you'll always see this on the top of the pile, because that's where it belongs now that I'm doing this as a formal thing and not just mood reading and stuff. So, first paragraph, third paragraph of my script is that I recommended this to pretty much everybody. In fact, when Thomas and I were dating, I bought a copy of this for him and gave it to him for our 3rd mensiversary. And he got so into it that he gave himself a bad sunburn. He was reading it outside in the park with the shirt off, and he gave himself a bad sunburn. So, now, the script. Mary Lennox is born to a British couple in India during the British Raj period. Mary was apparently an accident, and her parents want nothing to do with her. They turn her over to an ayah who defers to her in everything, lest her crying attract the attention and disapproval of her parents. Since no one really loves Mary, when people start to die from cholera, nobody bothers to tell her what's going on, or even to check on her. So it is that when someone comes to see if anybody is alive in the complex, they find Mary the lone survivor. Mary does not have any living aunts or uncles or cousins or grandparents by blood, so her closest relative, her father's sister's widowed husband, Archibald Craven, takes her in. Craven lives at Misselthwaite, a big house on the moor in Yorkshire. The house was built during the Tudor era, near as I can tell, and contains more than 100 rooms, most of them empty. Mrs. Medlock, the housekeeper at Misselthwaite, describes Mary as marred, which means spoiled. And I remember when I was pregnant with Alex, one of the theories I read was that you don't spoil a child by giving them too much attention. You spoil them by not giving them enough. And that's certainly true of Mary. We find out more about how lonely her life was. Mrs. Medlock asks Mary if her parents ever told her Uncle Archibald. She says her parents didn't tell her anything about anything. I haven't read The Secret Garden in a long time, so Mary's loneliness hit harder than usual here. Also, I somehow missed that the immensely long but low-built house in the book was Misselthwaite itself. Somehow my brain always made it the lodge with the light in the lodge window that Mrs. Medlock mentions as they go in. I guess it's because Mrs. Medlock mentioning there's one light in the window at the lodge, and there's only one light that Mary can see at Misselthwaite. I mean, that might make sense, right? Mrs. Medlock takes Mary to her rooms and tells her she will stay in those rooms pretty much all the time. Once again, almost nobody has any interest in her, except for a Yorkshire housemaid named Martha, who talks to her for the very first time like she's Mary's equal. And so begins Mary's transformation from a spoiled child to a civilized young woman. Martha does put her foot in it in an exchange that has not aged well when Martha says she expected Mary to be black. Black in this context means a native of India. Mary throws a fit and says that Indians are not people, they're servants. See, that has not aged well. Some of this may be the way that Mary was raised, but not little of this. No little of this is that little of this. What did I write? So much has changed in such a short time. She's utterly alone. She was always alone, but at least she had her eye on the servants in a strange place, and even though she never really knew her parents, at least she had them. At first, Mary doesn't even know how to dress herself, and Martha's nonplussed when Mary just stands there like a mannequin waiting for Martha to do it for her. And if she'd had a real lady's maid, she still never have learned many of the things she did, like dressing herself up and picking up after herself. But Martha wasn't actually a lady's maid, and so Mary ended up having to learn how to do these things for herself. Martha tells Mary stories about her home life, about their poverty, about her brother Dickon, which is short for Richard. Mary is fascinated by Dickon in particular, and Martha's talking about him is what encourages Mary to go outside on her own. Because Dickon likes to explore outside, and Mary's like, ooh, I want to be like that. Martha tells her that her uncle Archibald adored her Aunt Lilias, though we haven't heard her name yet. I thought it'd be weird not to mention it now. And that Archibald and Lilias had a garden that they cared for themselves. When Lilias died after an accident in the garden, Archibald locked the garden up and buried the key. While wandering around looking for the locked-up garden, Mary meets Ben Weatherstaff, one of the under-gardeners. Mary finds the walled-up garden, and a robin is sitting in one of the trees, which makes her notice the garden. She walks all the way around it, cannot find a door. That's how she knows it's the garden. She speaks to Ben, even though she doesn't know his name yet, and discovers that Ben is friends with the robin she saw on the wall. While talking to Ben, Mary realizes she's lonely. This had never occurred to her before. The robin makes overtures of friendship to her, and when she says that the robin had been in the walled-up garden, Ben told her the garden doesn't have a door and no one should go in there. Then, without saying goodbye, he leaves. Mary's life set into a rhythm of breakfast, exploring outside, dinner, exploring outside, supper, bedtime. Along the way, she becomes friends with the robin, the first time she ever liked anyone, develops a healthy appetite, the first time that ever happened, and experiences empathy for the first time. Mary pressures Martha into telling her why the garden's shut up. Martha, explaining she really shouldn't be telling Mary this, tells her that the garden had been Mary's uncle's favorite place. One branch of the trees hung lower than the others, and Lilias would use it as a seat. One day the branch fell, and Lilias was fatally wounded. Archibald was heartbroken and ordered the garden to be shut up and no one to ever go in there again. This makes Mary feel sorry for her uncle. The wind has picked up around the house, and as it wuthers around the building, the book Wuthering Heights, that's a reference. It's the way the wind kind of makes a woo-woo sound around it. Mary swears she hears someone crying, and Martha tells her it's probably the scullery maid who has a toothache. The next day it's raining too hard for Mary to go outside. Martha says that Misselthwaite has a library with thousands of books in it, so Mary decides to go looking for it. No one ever told her that she needed to ask permission to do anything before, so she just goes ahead and does it. On her way back to her room, she hears the crying again, and Mrs. Medlock catches her. She drags Mary back to her room, denying that Mary had heard someone crying, and tells Mary never to leave her rooms without permission. Once the storm lifts, it doesn't take Mary long to find the shut-up garden again, and in due time, the robin shows Mary where the key is. All Mary has to do now is find the door. This was appealing to Mary because she liked the idea of being alone in a place where no one would think to look for her. Martha comes back from a day at home and tells Mary that her siblings were very interested in Mary, and, surprisingly, Mary offers to tell Martha more so that she can share the stories with her family. Mila's sitting on the bed. She's not going to join us today, I guess. Martha also brings a present from her family, a jump rope. Mary thanks Martha, which surprises both of them. While practicing her jumping rope, Mary decides to skip around the closed garden. The robin stops at a place where the wall's covered with ivy, and a sudden gust of wind comes along and swings the ivy far enough that Mary can see a doorknob. She feels for it and finds the lock and swings the door to the garden open. The next scene is one of my favorites. I'm not a very descriptive writer, and I wish I could evoke a scene like Burnett does here. Mary sees that everything has become draped and festooned even with climbing roses. It's still winter, so she describes it looking like a gray mist. Mary explores the garden and begins to notice sprouts from bulb flowers. Okay, so it's early spring. like crocuses and daffodils. The sprouts are being crowded by the grass around them, so she digs them out. Like, digs around them, not takes them out of the ground. That was unclear, sorry. She realizes that later that the task would have been easier if she'd had real gardening tools. And Martha, upon discovering that Mrs. Medlock has been giving Mary $1 a week, suggests that Dickon buy her some tools and bring them over himself. Mary's thrilled at the idea of finally meeting Dickon. She hasn't told Martha where she's using it. She just says that she would like some gardening tools. Dickon does arrive after another week with the gardening tools and a parcel of packets of seeds. He's showing her what she bought when he asks if she has anywhere to garden yet. She admits that she does, but he has to promise he will never tell anyone where it is. After he assures her that the foxes trust him with the locations of their dens, and he will assuredly keep her secret, she takes him into the garden. He's heard of the garden, of course. Martha told him there's a garden that no one ever goes into. He takes her around and shows her what some of the plants are, how to prune the dead wood from the roses. He proves the work she has done done to open up the space around the sprouts and the bulbs. He does, however, notice that the garden is not nearly overgrown enough to have been left alone for 10 years. Once Mary has eaten her midday meal, Mrs. Medlock takes her to meet her Uncle Archibald. He's described as having a face that would have been handsome if it hadn't been so sad, and he clearly has scoliosis. You can see how far Mary has come in her social skills. Remember how at first she didn't even know she needed to ask permission ask for permission was a thing? Well, not only does she know how to ask for permission, but she manages to, rules lawyer him into giving her permission to use the garden without him ever knowing what she's doing. She asks that if she can garden anywhere that's not wanted, to which he consents. Boom. That night, another storm crops up and she hears the crying again. She follows the sound to a large bedroom. On the bed is a boy about her own age, crying as if he were tired and cross. Exact words. Mary notices how pale and thin the boy is. When he sees her, he tells her that he's Colin and Archibald is his father. He tells her that he doesn't want people to see him and that he believes he's terminally ill. It doesn't take Mary long to realize that Lilias had been pregnant with Colin when she fell off the branch swing and died. She makes the mistake of telling Colin about the garden. He at first wants to order the staff to let him and Mary into the garden, but she talks him down by telling him it would be better if it were a secret. She tells him what the garden's like by telling him what it would be like if they were able to find a way in. Finally, they decide they'll let their budding friendship be a secret as well. They'll let Martha know that they've met, and have Martha send for her when he wants her to visit. The next day, Mary tells Martha she's met Colin. Martha is immediately terrified, thinking that Mrs. Medlock will think that she told Mary about Colin, but Mary insists that Colin will protect them. Martha then tells Mary that Archibald cannot even look at Colin because Lilias died when Colin was born. She says that Colin has a bad temper and he refuses to go outside because he's had so many health problems in his life. Colin calls for Mary to visit him, and she tells him about India and about Dickon and suggests that someday they could visit the moor together. This irritates Colin since he's afraid to go outside. Mary's the first person in his whole life who isn't intimidated by him. He says that his doctor's next in line to inherit if Colin dies. He saw another doctor from London who said in Colin's hearing that if he were able to make up his mind to live, he might, live. Then Mary tells Colin about Dickon and about the tales Dickon told her about the moors, and they start to act like happy children for the first time in their lives. They're so happy they get caught by Dr. Craven and Mrs. Medlock. I just noticed we referred to most of the characters by their first names, even Lilias, whose name we haven't even learned yet, but not Mrs. Medlock. I think we know it. I just can't remember. Alice? I'm going to say it's Alice. I don't think we ever know Dr. Craven's first name. Colin insists that Mary has to come whenever he calls, and Dr. Craven says that Mary has him too excited. But Dr. Craven has to admit that Colin does look better. It takes another week for the rain to stop. I remember living in a place where it rained like that. Here we hardly get any rain at all, and when we do, it usually turns into a gully washer. And last year, a number of people died in the flooding. But Mary doesn't mind being trapped in the house because she and Colin, who have since realized that they're cousins, are having a good time together. After the rain stops, Mary returns to the garden and discovers that spring is very nearly there. The gray mist of the climbing roses is turning green, and the robin has found a mate and is building a nest. Together, Mary and Dickon decide that they should introduce Colin to the garden. Soon after that, Colin takes a step backwards. He has 2 meltdowns right in a row, one during the daytime and one at night. Mary, who's every bit as headstrong as he is, won't put up with this bullshit, and I can't believe I said that, and gives back as good as he gets. Colin has never been spoken to in this manner, everyone was too afraid of him, and so it pulls him up short both times. This is ultimately good for Colin, and he and Mary make up quickly and are having a good time together when Dr. Craven returns. He comes by every time Colin has a meltdown, but this time Colin's vital signs are fine. Colin tells Dr. Craven that he intends to go outside and enjoy the fresh air, which startles him since the very thought of being outside has caused Colin to have a meltdown on several occasions. The kids assure Dr. Craven that they'll have Dickon for company when they go out, which convinces Dr. Craven that Colin should be safe because everybody knows that Dickon can be trusted. Dickon comes to visit Colin, bring his menagerie with him, a crow named Soot, a fox named Captain, 2 squirrels named Nut and Shell, and a newborn lamb. The adults expected Colin to have a fit at the thought of all those animals in his home, but instead, Colin holds the lamb on his lap and feeds it from a bottle. At this point, I didn't know if I would have time to finish my reread. The ebook I checked out of the library was due back in 3 days, and I'm alternating with reading a chapter or 2 or 3 and summarizing it, and then reading a chapter 2 or 3 of the next book I'm going to review, which is Cape Fever by Nadia Davids, and summarizing them. If I run out of time, I'll do a quick summary of the ending, then go on to my thoughts. Speaking of my thoughts on The Secret Garden, I don't think I've read and reviewed Little Men. More on that later. Soon, Mary and Dickon are ready to introduce Colin to the garden. Colin calls for the head gardener, Mr. Roach, and demands no one be about to see him when he goes out in his chair. You see, Colin has been in his bed for so long that he cannot walk, and must use something called a chair carriage, which I always pictured as kind of a rattan wheelchair. I don't know if it actually was or not. When they arrive in the garden, Colin declares that he would be well again and live forever and ever. As they introduce Colin to the garden, Colin notices a dead tree with one of the branches fallen off. We all know what tree this is. This is the tree the branch broke off of and killed his mother. They take tea in the garden, and when Dickon says that Colin will walk someday, Colin's surprised. The other kids, they realize they've never asked if there's actually something wrong with Colin's legs. But Dickon kind of covers it up by saying he has legs, doesn't he? And Colin admits he's afraid to stand because his legs are so wasted. Soon after that, Colin asks about a man he sees, and Mary and Dickon see Ben Weatherstaff looking over the wall. Ben is furious and calls Mary wicked, but then he sees Colin and refers to him as the young cripple. I know, that's the word he used, and this is over 100 years ago. Anyway, Mary insists that Colin isn't disabled, and Colin is so furious that he stands up. He demands Ben join them in the garden, saying that Ben works for him when his father's away from home. Seeing Colin stand up makes Ben burst into tears. He loved, not that way, I don't think, Lilias, so this is very emotional for him, particularly since Colin looks so much like his mother. Ben admits that he's done the pruning that Dickon noticed earlier. Lilias had made Ben promise to take care of the roses if anything happened to her, so Ben's been climbing over the wall to do a bit of gardening from time to time. At this point, my library reclaimed my copy of the book that I'd been using to refresh my memory, so I'm just going to sort of fill out the rest from my recollections from the last time I read it, and the time before that, and the time before that, and the time before that. Anyway, I'm frankly kind of afraid to read this copy of the book because it's already in 3 pieces. Actually, I think it's 4. There's another loose page in here somewhere. 5, if you count the cover. I'm kind of afraid to reread this one because it's in such bad shape. Oh wow, I lost a piece of book just doing that. Every once in a while I research how to rebind a book. I think I might be able to rebind this and make it readable again, but then I chicken out because I'm afraid I'm going to damage it worse by the attempt. So it is what it is at this point. We'll see if I ever get courageous enough to try to rebind it. I will post the process here. So, as spring progresses, the neglected children and Ben Weatherstaff, along with Dickon, who's the only well-adjusted person in this picture. I mean, Martha's okay, but of the group that meets in the garden, and Uncle Archibald, and really Dr. Craven as well, continue to meet in the garden. The children learn to open themselves up to giving and receiving love, and there's a bit of Christian proselytizing in here. Remember the era in which it was written. Eventually, Archibald hears Lilias's voice telling him to go to the garden, which he does, and he finds that Colin is walking and healthy. The book ends with the staff seeing Archibald walking across the lawn with his son. Let me see. "Look there," he said, if thou's curious. "Look what's coming across the grass." When Mrs. Medlock looked up, she threw her hands and gave a little shriek, and every man and woman servant within hearing bolted across the servants' hall and stood looking through the window with their eyes almost starting out of their heads. Across the lawn came the master of Misselthwaite, and he looked as many of them had never seen him, and by his side, with his head up in the air and his eyes full of laughter, walked as strongly and steadily as any boy in Yorkshire, Master Colin. I love that. I get goosebumps every time. So, this kind of reminds me of, that's why I wanted to talk about Little Men before, because Little Men is kind of based on, okay, So Louisa May Alcott's dad was a transcendentalist and had these utopian ideas about education. And all the schools he tried to start failed. He started one or two, and they failed. And he'd get jobs with regular schools, and his teaching methods were so unorthodox. Unorthodox is a word, that he wouldn't be able to keep those jobs. And that's part of the reason why Alcott ended up writing all these books about childhood, because they sold. And the Alcott family needed money. So my mother was furious. She hated Bronson Alcott because, you know, she felt like it was his job to make sure that the family didn't starve, and it ended up falling to one of his children. But anyhow, but to some extent, Burnett's ideas about education are kind of similar. They're kind of, you know, it's important for children to grow and play and have freedom and, you know, explore and have, you know, that kind of thing. And because that's one of the discussions they have in here, is whether Mary needs a governess. Because back in the day, when you were wealthy enough, you had a governess come in and teach you, rather than having to go to school. School was for, like, the kids who were going to be working in factories. And maybe, you know, some of the kids were going to become, like, preachers and stuff. But if your family was upper class, and clearly the Cravens are, you have somebody come in to teach your kids. And of course, now that she knows, when they have this conversation, she doesn't know about Colin yet. And now I'm, like, imagining her and Colin in the classroom together, which is kind of fun. But anyhow, Mrs. Oh heck, Sowerby. Martha Dickens' mom, Mrs. Sowerby, talks to Mrs. Medlock and tells her to not to get a governess yet, to let her have her freedom to grow and play and have adventures and be a child and all that stuff. Which, you know, it kind of reminded me of the same thing, and so I need to reread. I did Little Women earlier, but I don't think I've done Little Men yet, so I need to do that one pretty soon, so I can, you know, finish that. There's also Joe's Boys, which is kind of darker. I don't like it as much, but I will, you know, and of course, the racism and the reference to using outdated words to refer to people with physical disabilities. Yeah, it's not great, but it's still a product of its time, and there's a lot of racism in these books. I think it's probably after World War II. I need to really look at these, but it seems like after World War II is when things started looking a little bit less racist in kids literature. There's still some questionable stuff, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where the original Oompa Loompas are an African pygmy tribe that Willie rescued and has keeping us as unpaid servants. And I think that was after World War II. But yeah, that seems to be pretty much the line between casual racism in children's books, and when it gets a little bit better. I also need to find, speaking of questionable terms for physical disabilities, another favorite from my childhood is one called The Little Lame Prince, but about a little boy with, I think he has cerebral palsy, and he's a prince, and his family's plotting against him, and it's a pretty good one, even though kind of a questionable name for, yeah. I'll have to see if I can. I had a copy of it. It's probably gone now. The copy I had wasn't new when I got it. It's like my copy of Little Women from 1915. I certainly wasn't on 1915. So anyway, one of my favorite books. Thought it would be a good place to start to do early in the year of me really trying to knuckle down and get this channel to take off and find some viewers. I know you're out there somewhere. I just have to find you. Anyway, so have a good day. Have a good week. I will see you later. And as always, if there's any books that you want me to try that you think I'd enjoy based on what you've seen here, leave them in the comments. And I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.